3 years ago I landed with 2 suitcases and a plan that lasted about 6 weeks before reality rewrote it. People online will tell you Mexico is either paradise with better weather and cheaper tacos, or a place you should never set foot in because of the news headlines. Neither one is true, and both of them are true, depending on the week, the neighborhood, and honestly, the hour of the day. If you want the real, unfiltered picture of life in this city, whether you already live here or you're thinking about it, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. I only make these once a year. I've been in Mexico for almost 10 years now, if you count the first stretch I did before I left and came back for good. In that time I've had chapters that felt genuinely magical, the kind where you're eating street corn on a Tuesday night and thinking you never want to live anywhere else, and I've had chapters that wore me down in ways I didn't expect, dealing with paperwork, with noise, with the small daily friction that nobody puts in a highlight reel. My only goal with this video is to show you what daily life actually feels like right now, not the version that sells a course or the version that scares you into staying home. Let's talk about money first, because that's what most people actually want to know. Rent depends enormously on where you are and what kind of building you're in. In the more central, walkable, foreigner-heavy neighborhoods, a one-bedroom in a newer building can run you anywhere from 15,000 to 25,000 pesos a month, which is roughly $800 to $1,300 depending on the exchange rate that week. Move a few metro stops out, into a more local, less Instagrammed area, and that same kind of apartment can drop to 7 or 8,000 pesos. Utilities are usually not included, and electricity in particular can surprise you if you run air conditioning through the hot months, since Mexico uses a subsidized tier system and once you cross a certain threshold the price per kilowatt jumps hard. Water is cheap on paper but unreliable in practice in a lot of buildings, which is its own cost, because you end up paying for a rooftop tank, a pump, or bottled water for drinking no matter what your income looks like. Insurance is one of those things people underestimate. Public healthcare exists and technically covers residents, but the wait times and coverage gaps push most long-termers, foreign or Mexican, toward either private insurance or paying cash for private doctors, which is still dramatically cheaper than the US or a lot of Europe, but it is not free, and it is not nothing. A basic private health plan can run somewhere between 1 and 4,000 pesos a month depending on your age and history. Groceries are where the gap between the postcard version and the real version shows up clearly. If you shop like a local, at the market, with seasonal produce, tortillas from the tortilleria, beans and rice in bulk, you can feed yourself well for maybe 3 or 4,000 pesos a month. If you shop like you did back home, imported cheese, name brand cereal, the products that remind you of a life you left, that same grocery bill can triple. Transportation is genuinely one of the wins here. The metro is absurdly cheap, a handful of pesos a ride, and even ride shares across a sprawling city rarely break the equivalent of $5 or $6 unless you're going a long distance in bad traffic. And then there's minimum wage, which sits far below what anyone I know actually lives on. The official minimum wage translates to something like $14 or $15 a day in a lot of the country, a bit more in the northern border zone. Nobody who's building a real life here, Mexican or foreign, is surviving purely on that number. The people who make it work long-term are usually stitching together income, a local salary plus freelance work, a small business plus remote clients abroad, family support plus a side hustle. It's less about one clean paycheck and more about several smaller streams running at once. Once you're actually living inside the housing, not just paying for it, the texture changes. A lot of the housing stock, especially outside the newest developments, was built decades ago, and that shows up in real ways. Water pressure that drops without warning. Gas that comes from a tank you have to schedule a truck to refill, and yes, you learn the sound of that truck's horn from 3 streets away. Noise travels differently here than a lot of people expect, thin walls, street vendors with their own distinct calls, music from a neighbor's party that goes past midnight on a random Wednesday. None of that is a deal-breaker, but it's a daily texture you adjust to rather than something you're warned about in advance. The trade-off between location and price is constant and personal. Live centrally and you pay more but you walk to everything, cafes, the market, your friends. Live further out and your rent drops significantly but you're spending real hours in transit, and that time cost is easy to underestimate until you're doing it 5 days a week. Hidden costs stack up too: a deposit that's sometimes 2 or 3 months instead of 1, a broker fee if you use an agent, furniture you didn't expect to need because a lot of rentals here come completely empty, no stove, no fridge, sometimes not even light fixtures. If you currently live in Mexico, drop one real thing in the comments that either makes you stay or makes you question it. The honest answers help more than any polished list. Safety is the topic that generates the most noise online and the least nuance. The truth is that safety here is hyper-local, almost block by block, in a way that's hard to convey with a single national statistic. I've lived in neighborhoods where I walk home at midnight without thinking twice, and I've been in others, sometimes a 20-minute drive away, where locals themselves will tell you to be inside before dark. You learn to read a place the way you'd read weather, paying attention to how busy the street is, whether shops are still open, whether people are out walking dogs. That's not paranoia, it's just the low hum of awareness that becomes automatic after a while, and honestly it's not that different from the mental calculus people run in plenty of big cities anywhere in the world. Traffic is its own daily mental load, particularly in the bigger cities. What should be a 20-minute drive can become an hour and a half with no warning, and public transport, while cheap, can be packed to a degree that surprises newcomers, especially certain metro lines during rush hour. Climate depends hugely on where you land. Some regions give you eternal spring, mild all year, and others swing into brutal heat for months where air conditioning goes from a luxury to a necessity, which loops right back to that electricity bill I mentioned earlier. Rainy season brings its own rhythm too, flash flooding on certain streets that locals just know to avoid by 4 in the afternoon, an unspoken map that took me an embarrassingly long time to learn. Then there's the question of community, which is more complicated than the warm, welcoming reputation suggests. The reputation is earned in some ways. People here are generally warm, family-oriented, quick to include you in a meal or a conversation. But building real, deep friendships, the kind where someone shows up for you in a crisis, takes longer than the honeymoon phase implies, especially if you're not fluent in Spanish or not embedded in a workplace or family structure that forces regular contact. There's also a transient quality in a lot of the foreigner-heavy pockets, people cycling through on 6-month stints, which means you can find yourself saying goodbye to good friends every few months if you're only socializing within that circle. The antidote, from what I've seen, is stepping outside that bubble, into local classes, local jobs, local friend groups, where the relationships tend to have more staying power, but that requires effort most people don't expect to have to put in. So where does that leave things? The honest answer is somewhere in the uncomfortable middle that doesn't make for a great thumbnail. The cost of living really is lower than a lot of places, but it's not the fantasy number some videos throw around, and it takes real budgeting to hit. The culture really is warm and rich and full of small daily joys, but genuine belonging takes time and intention, not just showing up. The safety concerns are real in specific places and wildly overstated as a blanket national picture. None of this adds up to a verdict. It adds up to a place that rewards people who come in with open eyes and punishes people who come in with a fantasy. The real version of living here looks different depending on your income, your neighborhood, your language skills, and honestly your temperament, and only you can weigh that against your own life. If this gave you something honest to chew on, give it a thumbs up. It actually helps this reach more people who are trying to make a real decision instead of a romantic one. Subscribe with the bell on so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment, tell me the real reason you stay here, or the real reason you're on the fence about leaving. Whether you live here already or you are still deciding, protect your peace and make the choice that actually fits your life. I'll see you in the next one.